Live from the Deer and Deer Hunting headquarters here in Iola, Wisconsin. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to Deer Talk Now. I'm Dan Schmidt. He's Brian Lovett. Thanks for joining us once again on your lunch hour, your break, at night. These are all catalogs, so you can watch them any time of the year, any time of the day. Today, we are sick of talking about the weather, but we're gonna intro it a little bit, Brian, and talk about a few myths about weather and how it affects wildlife, how it affects deer. And one that we had yesterday that I had one of our loyal readers and viewers send in said he thought he was shed hunting. Well, he didn't think he was shed hunting, and he thought he saw by indications that deer were actually eating corn stalks, like the leaves and everything around that. And he said, could this be possible? Could deer actually be doing that? And I said, actually, yes. In this kind of conditions, this kind of weather, this kind of winter that we've had, by the way, it's been the worst winter in 100 years, since 1903, I believe,
yes,
as far as cold goes.
Yeah.
Average temperature here in Wisconsin has been 10 degrees for this winter. And I said, actually, you know, it's a myth that there's things that deer won't eat. They'll basically eat anything. Mm-hmm. And we kind of got to talking about that, and, you know, turkey season's coming up here. I mean, in some places it's closer than a month away. And one of the things we often hear about is how this, you know, this deep snow, especially in the Midwest and the upper Midwest, and the cold weather all the way down to south, how this is going to affect turkeys and how this is going to affect, you know, turkey season and how things are going to unfold this spring. Is that true?
Well, I guess it depends how you view it. I mean, certainly right now, I mean, if this cold and deep snow persists through March, it's going to keep them in those big winter flocks near the best food source around, you know. So that will certainly affect them, you know. But really, the breeding season is affected much more by photoperiod than by the environmental conditions. So as we get into April and say mid-April, and turkeys typically start to breed around here, I mean, unless it's just incredibly harsh conditions, you're going to see those gobbler groups start to break up. You're going to see the hens start to break up a little bit, and you're going to see, you know, what I'd call typical breeding activity commence pretty much on schedule. You know, I guess environmentally you might, if there's not a lot of nesting cover that's grown up, you know, and is available in, say, mid-May when turkeys would typically start to nest, that might affect it somewhat in terms of nest success. But as we've seen around here, the hens will, if they lose their nest, they have great success in second nesting attempts. I know when our fall season comes in, there's a lot of those little second nest poults that are out there running around that probably hatched in July, you know, from a second nesting. It's really
interesting to bring that up, because when you say photoperiod, animals are animals, right? I mean,
yeah.
and turkeys actually have the luxury of being able to have a second chance at it, so to speak, or they can nest again.
Right, yeah. I mean, they're much more adaptable than we ever gave them credit for, you know. And I think research back in the 60s said that a hen that would lose a nest, something like 30% would re-nest or something like that. And, you know, obviously we can't quantify it. It's just anecdotal observations as we drive to and from work or out in the woods. But it seems like a really high percentage around here are very successful in second nesting attempts. So that's good. I mean, the more little turkeys on the landscape, the better it is for us as turkey hunters a spring or two away. So
that's fascinating, you know, and it's the same thing with deer. We talk about it during the rut, and we talk about, oh, it's so hot, you know, that rut's going to be delayed, and we say it's not going to be delayed. It's just going to be happening when you don't see it. It's going to be happening at night for deer, you know.
Yeah, it was interesting last year. I mean, we had a horrible late winter that persisted into about the third week of April with, you know, really bad deep snow conditions, you know, and people said, well, gosh, they're not doing anything. It's terrible. I mean, I hunted with a couple friends that first week, and I'll be honest, they were tearing it up last year. I mean, they were, you know, people say, oh, you're going to have to use gobbler and jake calls. The hen talk won't work. I mean, we almost got run over by turkeys several occasions. I mean, it doesn't take too much to get a gobbler ready to go in spring. I mean, he's looking to have his chance to, you know, get with the hens and do his gobbler thing in spring. So, I mean, it's certainly, I think it affects us as hunters more than it does the turkeys, to be honest.
Absolutely. What about, let's just talk about that a little bit more. We're going to get to our guest here in a second, but let's talk about how does winter, especially a really bad winter, affect turkey populations?
Well, it's tough on them. You know, I mean, I think this winter especially is an anomaly, but we've seen it be tough on all wildlife around here. I'm not so concerned about them around here because there's enough agriculture, enough people spreading manure. In fact, across from our office, we've seen turkeys that are making a living eating crab apples that grew on the crabapple trees across the highway from our office. In some big timber areas, especially up north where you've had more snow and it's been colder, I think some of those birds that may have gotten isolated in the timber, they might be in trouble. You know, I think you're going to see a higher mortality than you would in a quote-unquote typical winter. But there's always turkey mortality. I mean, turkeys die every day. I mean, they're pretty frail, but that's why they're prolific. You know, that's why they succeed as a species, because they essentially, a turkey population replaces itself every 4 years just because they are so prolific with the spring hatch. So although we might see a little higher than normal mortality this year, I don't think it's gloom and doom for turkeys. It might, in the northern part of the state, knock them down for a year or two. But again, they're much more adaptable than we ever gave them credit for. There were never supposed to be turkeys that far north, you know, in historical terms. So I think they'll be okay. Might affect this spring a little bit, next spring, but I think long term they'll be all right.
Same thing with deer. I mean, it's some great insights you have there, Brian, because same thing with deer. For the most part of the country, the deer are going to be fine. Will there be some losses? Yes, there'll be some losses. In pockets, there'll be maybe greater losses than others, obviously. And mostly the young and the weak, and and that's the way it's going to be, and that's the way Mother Nature balances herself out. And speaking of balancing herself out as far as Mother Nature goes, today's week here at deeranddeerhunting.com, we're talking about predator control. We're talking about predator hunting because that's a key component in a good overall wildlife management plan, especially if you're managing for deer. You're going to manage for all species on your property. You're going to manage predators. The deal we have going on this week at shopdeerhunting.com is we have our electronic predator calls on sale. You have to check these out. Some of the best predator calls on the market. Whether you're whatever you're going for, most people are targeting coyotes, so that's what we're focusing on this week. And our special guest today is Corey Lundberg. He lives out in Utah. He's considered one of the best predator hunters, one of the best coyote hunters in the country. And we're going to be talking to Corey today. What's really fascinating I find about this, Brian, is that predator hunting is just, it's absolutely just taken off in the past couple of years. People are really becoming interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, not only from a recreational standpoint, I mean, I think it gives, you know, your average hunter something to do in the quote-unquote off months, but also because management is so much in the forefront of our consciousness nowadays. I mean, I think people realize that predator hunting, predator control is, as you said, I mean, part of any overall management plan, you know. So, I mean, it's win-win, basically. It's recreation during the off-season and, you know, just gives that deer and turkey populations a little extra boost, help them through the year. So.
Absolutely, and you not only get to have some fun at it, if you're really adept at it, you can sell furs and make a little money back off of your pastime, which is pretty cool. Well, let's get Corey on the line, Brian, and let's talk a little bit coyote hunting today on Deer Talk Now.
This is Corey.
Corey, hi, this is Dan Schmidt and Brian Lovett from Deer Talk Now.
How are we doing?
Pretty good. How are you this morning?
Doing well.
Well, thanks for joining us on the program. I have to admit, Alan Clemens has talked you up as quite the coyote hunter. I know you're out there in Utah. How's the weather out there for you today?
You know, today it's not bad. Spring's here finally. It's overcast again, but we'll take that over snow. But I'm sure you guys back there know what snow is.
Oh, that's all we've been talking about the past few weeks.
Pretty much, yeah. We're coming out to Utah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Corey. We're going to talk a little bit just about some of the basics to predator hunting, because a lot of Deer Talk Now listeners and people who are watching the archives are new to the sport, maybe wherever they are, whether they're in the Midwest or the West or the Southeast. We've just been talking about this new found interest, I guess, in predator hunting in general. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, what you're doing today, and how you tackle the whole predator hunting game.
Okay. Well, I grew up here in Utah. I started predator hunting when I was in college at Utah State, and honestly, I just stumbled upon a coyote one day with me and my friends. We were out, you know, just on kind of a rodeo out in the desert. I decided, you know what, I'm going to try and figure out how to hunt one of these things. So I started, you know, back then the internet wasn't around, so it was books and magazines and VHS tapes, anything I could figure out, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And then there was, I forget how long it was, but I had about 5 of them in the back of my truck, and a rancher stopped me, asked me where I got them, etc. And I just told him kind of in these foothills, and he said, I'll pay you $35 for each of those, and then come back and start hunting. He was a sheep rancher. I said, come back and start hunting my area where my sheep are, where the sheep are going to start lambing, etc. And I'll pay your gas and $25 a coyote. And for a college kid, I thought that was heaven, really. So that's how it started. And I started killing coyotes for pheasant farm, like for bird ranchers, cattle ranchers, sheep ranchers, and then people started wanting me to take them, etc. And I met, it was actually Corey Cannon. He was repping for Beretta at the time. I did a combo hunt with Beretta at Federal, and it kind of just snowballed. He introduced me to more PR people, and yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So, kind of got your taste of it, but then a little bit of incentive there to help some of those ranchers out, which gives you, I guess, a unique perspective on this, because living out there, you have, ranches, you're talking thousands of acres, right?
Yeah, tens of thousands of acres. The first one, I don't even know. It was on the border of Utah and Nevada, and I honestly don't know what the boundaries were. Why do you? I just hunted. The coyotes, honestly, they don't care what boundaries are either, so it's just, you just go where you can find them and kill them. So.
Hey, Corey, kind of describe to me, if you could, your philosophy on a quote-unquote typical day of coyote hunting. What you go out, where you might start, how long you might stay at each particular set. What's your overall philosophy?
It changes a little bit depending on the season, but typically, and this is pretty typical across the board. In the morning, if you can, you start with the sun at your back, so if the coyote comes in, he looks into the sun and you're not. You play the wind if possible. When we started, we like to have a little bit of elevation so you can see down in front of you, and that's always good. If you can see more than they can, it helps you. But this time of year, they're pairing up and starting to mate and stuff, so they take a little bit longer to respond. Typically, I'll stay 15 minutes, maybe 20 on a stand, but now I'll stay, 30, maybe even 40, depending on how the area looks and if you've heard them in the area and stuff like that. So one thing, I know a lot of people, they talk about the wind, and you do want to play the wind if possible, but we were out this last week and talking about it. If you have a little 2-track going through the desert and that's all you have, the wind's blowing at your back all the way down the 2-track, it's tough just to pack it up and go to another area. So if you can, you play the wind, but you just kind of have to you kind of play with felt as well, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, are you also so in a sense, are you approaching a predator, like a coyote hunt, almost in the same fashion as a lot of guys will approach turkeys, as far as the vocal aspect to it, like going out and trying to get one to respond?
Yeah, right now, in fact, I'll be honest, I've never hunted turkeys. That's on my little punch list to get done. But from what I've talked, even Alan and some other guys, it's very similar. Like any animal, but coyotes definitely have their own vocalization. The more you get into it, you learn this. Like when they start mating, they have challenge howls, they have lonesome howls and invitation howls and stuff like that. And right now, that's all we'll do sometimes. Sometimes they don't respond hardly at all to the stress sound because they have other stuff on their mind. But if you throw out a challenge out there and there's a male coyote in that area, he doesn't want any competition, so he'll come with his hackles raised and he'll come trying to get that other guy out of there.
Hey, Corey, kind of describe to me, if you could, how your approach might vary in terms of having a wide open area to hunt versus thick timber or thick cover like you might experience east of the Mississippi here. Does it really change your approach, or is it still the same philosophy that holds true throughout?
I've been spoiled out here. West we have tons and tons and tons of area, and I'll be honest, before this year, in fact, I've never really hunted back east. But out here, if you either you don't have any luck, or you're ruining it coming in, you can just pack up and move along. But back east, a lot of guys, they only have certain allotments of land, and so you have to take every advantage you can. Like I was back east up in the upper UP with Mr. Binden from Tritchicone, and I'd never hunted stuff like that. It was the stuff we were hunting first, it was so thick, and you only have certain shooting lanes, and I guess Texas is very similar. They hunt the senderos, and you have to capitalize on what you can see. I know guys back east, they use a lot more decoys, and they take advantage of every, what's the right word? Companies are coming out with more and more tricks, basically, or tools to use for predator hunting. And I think guys back east, they have to take advantage of those things just because of, like I said, the size and lack of size, I guess, of places they have to hunt.
That's one thing I wanted to get into next, Corey, was just about tools. You mentioned tools, and we have calls, we have electronic calls, we have decoys, but let's just start from the basics. Now, I know this does differ whether you're hunting in western wide open terrain or eastern thick wooded terrain, but let's talk about just the tool as far as the firepower you use. Rifles, shotguns, both. Maybe take us through what you found works best for you for hunting coyotes.
Okay. I shot a 223. The typical calibers or any of the lower center fires, 223, 2250, 243, the 204. Those are the basic, meat and potatoes. You can obviously hunt with anything, but we both shoot, me and my friend Danny, we both shoot 2250s right now. One of us usually packs a shotgun. And like I said, the industry's come a long ways. They're starting to make coyote-specific shotgun loads. Where they're pricey, they're still very effective. So we'll take one of each. Basically, I'll take a shotgun and my rifle. Dan takes the rifle, carries the collar, and then hopefully you get the ones that come in close with the shotgun, and then you can take care of the rest of them out.
So that's kind of the tactic, is if you're double teaming with somebody, just in case you have a coyote come in close, you want that guy with a shotgun?
Yeah, possible. For instance, we were hunting in the world competition this last December, and the second day we were there, it was picture perfect. We just got fresh snow. There was no wind. We were both setting up facing west, and just got done a series of calls, and we're waiting to see if anything came. I looked to my left, and literally 8 feet to my left, this coyote comes in from the back, trotting towards the collar, and my gun is on its six, pointing, out in front of me, and they pick up on any slight movement so quickly. And my shotgun was sitting down on my right side, so I could move my arm without the coyote seeing it. So I picked up my shotgun, as slowly as possible, brought it up. When he went behind a sagebrush, I got it to my shoulder, and he was still, 9 feet away at the time. And I moved a little bit, he stopped, I was able to get it, still froze, and I took him with the shotgun right there. And so, yeah, that was a perfect example of how it's supposed to work.
I know you said you did a lot of work with ranchers before, and obviously they probably want every coyote on their place taken off, especially during lambing season. But for a recreational property manager, a guy who has a few hundred acres and is obviously trying to help out his deer and his turkeys and everything, how much predator hunting really makes a difference? I mean, is it just, even if you just take a coyote or two, is that just going to give your other wildlife a little boost? Or, I mean, how do you gauge how much effort you really need to put into it to really make a difference in terms of knocking down the predators in a certain area?
Well, predator control itself, you're never going to get rid of all the coyotes. Anyone that says, I'll get rid of the coyotes for you, it's just a fallacy. The best you can hope for is to give your animals a break during their lambing, or fawning season or calving season. And granted, you can knock the numbers down, but if a given area supports X number of coyotes based on, habitat and food, it's going to support that number of coyotes unless you're out there constantly, And if a rancher or a property manager is serious about it, run traps or snares constantly because those things work 24/7. Where a hunter is only out there certain hours. But coyotes are devastating on fawns or turkeys, because I live, my backyard's close to the mountains here, and I was up with my boys, and they were playing airsoft, honestly, and they were running through the trees, and it's still incorporated in the city, so you can't hunt there, but there were so many carcasses of deer, and big and small, and you can hear the coyotes every night, and where they can't be touched, they just kind of have a field day back there. So it's definitely needed. If you during lambing season or turkeys when they still lay their eggs, if you can get out there and hammer as much as possible, you're going to give those other animals a break, at least to get them on the ground, get them on their feet. And I don't know number-wise what it does, but it's definitely important.
It's a good point that you bring up because, all this stuff kind of goes back to circle. When we talk about deer, we talk about turkeys, we talk about coyotes. And one thing Corey says is, if it's going to support coyotes, it's going to support coyotes. And the same thing with deer. I mean, you can hammer away at that doe herd. Yeah, eventually you're going to make a dent if you keep doing it. But if you have great habitat, you're going to have a good deer population. Sure. Corey, let's go back to a little bit of your tactics. I'm interested in. I'll admit I have not done a lot of coyote hunting, but some of the coyote hunting that I have done in the past, it seems to me that whether I've been trying it or it's mostly somebody else has been calling, you have a coyote come in and he quote unquote hangs up. What are some of the tactics that you use that when you get a coyote to respond but he's not quite into shooting range, what do you do to try to lure that coyote into those last few yards?
And you said the right word, it's try, because once he makes up his mind, you can't change it. I've had people, guiding. You're not always fortunate enough to have people who know what they're doing. I've had guys get up and actually physically get up, run back to me and say, "There's a coyote over there," and then you look out, the coyote's leaving, and he's like, "Hey, make him come back." I'm not going to make him do anything. So, but typically, if he hangs up, and they're wary, and this time of year they've been hunted a lot. They're more cautious. Companies are making decoys. My good friend Pat Brown or Flannel, they make an actual coyote decoy. And sometimes the purpose behind that is the coyote's coming in, he's not sure. They want to see something as well, because they eat, they smell, they hear, and all day long that's what they do for a living. So if they hear something, they come in and they don't see anything, sometimes it triggers like, that's not right. There should be something here moving around. So if they come in and they see a decoy, it's supposed to make them feel more comfortable or threatened. Hey, that guy got here first. I'll him out of there. Another one, like I use Fox Pros, and they make an attachment that goes to the collar itself. It's like a little, either a feather or, just a little floppy, furry thing. So when a coyote comes in, he hears the distress sounds. He doesn't necessarily know what it is. I don't think he cares what it is, but he comes in, he puts, sound, movement together, and he's like, well, there's what I'm looking for. So that breaks the barrier as well. I also, right now, I have a dog. They're called tolling dogs. This time of year, during breeding season and denning season, coyotes get super territorial. And Duke, he's kind of like a bird dog. They kind of have it naturally. They go out and they roam, they come back. Coyotes don't want any other canine in their area, so they come in, they see Duke, and sometimes they just lose all. It's kind of like a buck in a rut. They just kind of lose their senses. They come in, they might know you're there still, but they can't get their mind off their dog, and that triggers it a lot of times.
Hey, Corey, let me circle back a little bit to guns and ammo again. Obviously, if you're shooting quite a few coyotes, one of the side benefits we talked about is being able to sell your fur. What, in terms of fur damage to the coyote, what considerations do you make in terms of the caliber you're shooting and the load you're shooting?
To be honest, I don't put up much fur since I started doing the guiding aspect. If my clients want to, that's a different story. But the 204 is really good for coyotes on fur. The 223 is a great choice. 2250 is even good. The 243 is going to typically blow through every time. You hit a bone or shoulder, it can make a mess. But on coyotes, they're pretty hardy, honestly. If you take a fox there, that's a different story. They're very light-skinned. And if you're targeting fur specifically, some guys will change their caliber choice. They'll go to you can go to 17, Fireball to 17 Remington. And then you start getting into, if it's going to run off or take them down exactly, but you definitely want to stay to the smaller side of those calibers if possible.
Mm-hmm.
What about camouflage, Corey? Is there a particular camo that you use, or how important is camouflage, especially like on your hands and your face?
It's important. I use there's every company's now calling like a Western version. I use the Under Armour Tree Stand, the new one. It came out. I just like it for everything year round. But the Mossy brush that came out, King's camo, they're Western specific. That's where they started. But realistically, movement's the biggest issue. You can go out and hunt in if you're out deer hunting with your hunter's orange on, as long as you hold still, that's the main ingredient. You'll still be able to call them in. I forgot who it was. Someone proved the point. They went out in the Santa Claus suit to call coyotes, and they called them in and killed them that day. So movement's the biggest thing. But, like hands, typically when you're calling, a lot of guys use the hand calls. Their hands are moving the most, or your face is moving side to side. And the sun shines on our faces, and it's pretty bright. I mean, if you think about a coyote coming in, when he's facing the sun, you see his white fur. That's what gives him away a lot of times, and it's the same thing for us. So anything that's going to be moving as little as possible, that's definitely what you want to cover up if possible.
How about optics? I guess like you were talking before about having a rifle and a shotgun there take care of the long, medium, and short ranges. But if you're shooting a rifle, regardless of caliber, what kind of optics setup do you prefer?
Depends on the rifle. I shoot Trijicon on mine. On the bolt guns, I just shoot their Acupoint 5 to 20. And for coyotes, I don't typically hunt with it more than 5 just because it's field of view unless you have time to seriously crank it down. But on my ARs, I'll put the same thing, and then I mount the RMR on 45 degree on the right side. So if they're up close, you kind of just roll it and you use the dot instead of that kind of takes care of the shotgun and rifle for a lot of people. And then binoculars, I used to pack everything, and anymore you try to cut down on everything you're packing around. So I use the Swarovski range-finding binoculars. I'm fortunate enough to have friends, in the industry. So, and they're phenomenal. Having that all in one, is invaluable, really. But if you can sit down, set up, a lot of guys, they'll bring little rangefinders out. If you can sit down, you start ranging, this tree, that bush, that rock. A lot of times you don't have time. From coyotes, they fall out of nowhere sometimes. So you don't have time. But you know ahead of time how far, this or that is. It gives you a very big advantage.
Well, thank you very much, Corey. Very informative information. We can tell you're not only into this, but you're really good at it. That's all the time we have today. We want to thank you, Corey, for joining us. Everybody who wants to learn more about Corey's tactics, we're going to have a link right there at the Deer Talk Now tab where you can find out more about Corey, find out more about his tactics, and get a hold of his video. Corey, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good rest of the week.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. That gets a guy excited, Brian. I mean, there's so many things that we can do in the off season, but that sounds like a lot of fun, especially where he's at. I mean, you got a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, just listening to him describe the wide open country out there, and just imagining taking a day and being able to do multiple stands like that, it seems very appealing, especially this time of year. So
what I like about his tips actually are, you can take these no matter where you live and use this, and it gives you a better idea on how to approach it, especially like you said, if you have a smaller property, it's a couple hundred acres, you got to kind of keep that in mind. And it's I kind of almost liken it to turkey hunting. You sit for 20 minutes, and you don't have to. It's not like sitting there deer hunting, sitting there all day long, and try a few different things.
Right. Well, initially I was going to ask him about tips for getting a beginner into coyote hunting, but he covered it so well on his basic fundamentals that he talked about early on. I mean, having the sun at your back early, being elevated early on, playing the wind if you can. I mean, it really kind of fits into a common sense approach, I guess, that almost seems like anyone could really go out without much experience and at least have a good starting point to go on and begin predator hunting. Obviously, there's many nuances you're going to pick up along the way, which he, of course, has through experience. But in terms of, right out of the gate and being able to at least have a good chance at being able to kill some coyotes. I mean, I think
Great
you covered it
tips.
very well. Yeah.
Great tips, especially the one with the signage back. I never
Yeah.
really thought about that. A lot of times when we've gone out, we've just gone out, you know,
Right,
walked
yeah.
out, sat down, started calling, and
Yeah.
not really thought too much about it, and then wonder why you didn't have success, or wonder why that coyote didn't come in those last, 50 yards that you needed to come in.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, that's very cool. I want to remind everybody today, shopdeerhunting.com. You want to go there, especially not only for the great deer hunting products. We have great Weston meat grinders on sale today, but the electronic predator collars. If you've ever wanted one of these, we got them on sale there today, and you get an extra 10% off by just mentioning you saw it on Deer Talk. You check out, you enter Deer Talk in the coupon code, you're going to get the extra 10% off. Check it out, the electronic collars on shopdeerhunting.com today. We're going to have a great show next week. We're going to have Ted Nugent in the house. It's going to be an awesome show, so you're going to want to buckle your seatbelts for that one. But until next week, I'm Dan Schmidt along with Brian Lovett. Thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now.